Welcome to Grand Rounds at the UCSF Osher Center for Integrative Health. My name is Shelley Adler, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the Osher Center. And today I am delighted to introduce you to Dr. Wendy Demark-Wahnefried. Dr. Demark-Wahnefried earned her doctoral degree in nutritional science from Syracuse University. She's professor and Webb Endowed Chair of Nutrition Sciences at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and Associate Director for Cancer Prevention and Control at the O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Center. Her research includes determining mechanisms of nutrition-based therapies and developing, testing, and disseminating home-based interventions that improve diet, physical activity, and functional status among populations with increased risk for cancer. To date, her research has been supported by 17 NIH grants and has resulted in over 350 peer-reviewed publications. Dr. Demark-Wahnefried has been recognized as a Komen Professor of Survivorship and an American Cancer Society Clinical Research Professor. She served on several committees, including the National Cancer Policy Forum of the National Academy of Sciences and guidelines panels of the American Cancer Society, World Cancer Research Fund, American College of Sports Medicine, and the American Society of Clinical Oncology. And you can see why we are so excited to have you here today. After Dr. Demark-Wahnefried's presentation, we'll have about 15 minutes for discussion. So please share any questions you have by sending them to me using the chat feature. And then during the Q&A, you can also post questions directly if you want to come on video. So before we begin, I want to thank our wonderful Grand Rounds Planning Committee, Drs. Selena Chan, Anand Dhruva, and Patty Moran. Our wonderful team includes Jen Shea, Yvette Coulter, and Julia Burns. And now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Demark-Wahnefried.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me to Grand Rounds, and I know it's really early for you. I'm hoping to breeze through here and save a lot of time for questions, because I think that that's the platform that Zoom really excels in. So today I'm going to talk about developing scalable diet and exercise interventions for cancer prevention and control. I'm going to review some current diet and exercise guidelines for cancer prevention and control. Identify key activities for designing those interventions and overcoming some common barriers, and then just talk about two highly scalable interventions that we have done or are currently doing. So just as a brief overview of what's happening in the cancer world, here are the ACS projections for this year. There are going to be over 2 million cases of cancer that are diagnosed in this country, and here they are featured here. I just want to point out, because I am a nutrition scientist, is that a lot of these are what are considered obesity-related cancers. There are 13 different cancers for which obesity is considered a risk factor, and 15 different cancers for which obesity is considered a poor prognostic factor. So this is one of the places where we can really make a difference, or at least our research team can make a difference. Now some statistics on cancer survivorship, which has been a key interest area of ours. The data that have been generated over the past 50 years show that we are making tremendous strides in being able to improve the prognosis of cancer survivors. 50 years ago, individuals who were diagnosed with cancer had a 1 in 2 chance of living 5 years. Now 70% of cancer survivors, or people who are diagnosed with cancer, can expect a 5-year survival. The net result of this, however, is that the number of cancer survivors is growing astronomically. Right now, we have more than 18 million cancer survivors in the United States, and that growth is really realized in populations that are 65 and older. And why is that? Well, we are having a gray tsunami happening in this country, and we know that cancer is a disease of aging. So the two of those factors combined really do contribute to this trend. And that's good news. But here's the bad news about cancer survivorship. Cancer survivors are at increased risk by virtue of having a diagnosis of cancer, having progressive disease. They are at significantly increased risk for having another cancer develop, and even greater risk for cardiovascular disease. So having an MI and various heart disease, stroke, that sort of thing. But other things that they are, other comorbidity that they are more susceptible to are diabetes, osteoporosis, sarcopenia, and because of that sarcopenia, functional decline. But we can make a difference with lifestyle interventions. And so this presentation really focuses in that area. Now, just as a brief review, there are two organizations that make guidelines for cancer survivors. The granddaddy of them is the World Cancer Research Fund American Institution for Cancer Research, who really do a very thorough effort in combing the literature, finding out the new findings. Their third expert report came out in 2018. And the American Cancer Society basically takes those findings, uses it as a foundation, and then takes more current literature and adds on to it. And more current literature, not only in the cancer field, but also what's going on in diabetes, what's going on in heart disease, to make sure that their guidelines kind of sync with other national organizations. So really briefly, both of the guys, you'll see a lot of similarities here. Be a healthy weight throughout life, be physically active. The American Cancer Society puts a little bit more window dressing on, not window dressing, but more recommendations with regard to moderate physical activity and vigorous physical activity and what the benchmarks are for those. Eating a dietary pattern that's plant-based, high in whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans. And then to limit the amount of fast foods, processed foods, so sugars, fats, refined carbohydrates, limiting the amount of red and processed meats, and then also sugary drinks. Alcohol, the guidelines for the WCRF, again, they're older, and at that point in time, the guidelines were a little bit more lenient. We have found out from the American Heart Association that alcohol doesn't have necessarily the cardioprotective effects that we thought it did for a large population. Yes, there are cardioprotective effects for a very narrow sliver of cardiovascular disease, but because of that, their guidelines are a little bit more stringent, best not to drink at all. So what are cancer survivors doing? Well, here are the results of a really nice review paper by Tolosa. And it shows here that cancer survivors aren't following those guidelines. So most of them have overweight and obesity, eat low fiber diets, do not eat the recommended servings of fruits and vegetables a day, eat high fat diets, eat more meat than they should. They're underactive, and there is a smaller but significant proportion of cancer survivors who drink more than they should too. This is mostly prostate cancer survivors, but other survivors as well. And when we look at those data all together, 77% have high BMIs or practice multiple bad behaviors. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this area. How did we get into this? Well, back when troglodytes ruled the earth and I had my KO7, we started looking at women that were getting adjuvant chemotherapy for breast cancer. And in that population, weight gain was being reported it was just kind of hot off the press. So we proposed to do an observational study in women that got adjuvant chemotherapy and those that got localized treatment. And in those days, localized treatment meant localized treatment, either surgery and radiation, not hormonal treatment. So it was a very nice, clean control. What did we find? We found that in that year following diagnosis, they didn't really change their dietary behaviors, the women that were receiving chemotherapy, but they did reduce their physical activity, and they had significant changes in their body composition. They, if you look down at the table that's featured there in the light blue, They gained weight, a significant amount of weight, and most of that weight was fat mass, and they lost lean body mass. Normally speaking, when you gain weight, you tend to gain weight, you tend to gain fat and muscle mass. So this was a very unique pattern of weight gain, and it was known as sarcopenic obesity, for which resistance training exercise is kind of the hallmark. So over the 1 year in that chemotherapy group, if you compared them to the normative data, they aged, their body composition changes, they suggested that they aged 10 years in just that 1 year. So significant adverse body composition change. So what we did is we said, well, let's see if we can intervene. And I was at Duke at the time. We had a Center for Living, which was great. We had a whole fleet of exercise physiologists that really targeted the areas where that lean body mass was lost, which was in the lower body region. And we did a small pilot study, 10 individuals there, and really we not only targeted the exercise, but then we also paired it with a plant-based calcium-rich diet. And we stood back and saw what the effects that could be. Now here is the graph with what we found from that observational study. You gained fat, you lost lean body mass. However, in these women, we found that with our 6-month program, they actually could improve their lean body mass and reduce their fat mass. So conceivably, it was feasible. However, what we also found is it took 3 years to recruit those 10 women, which showed that doing an in-person intervention just was not feasible. At least it wasn't feasible in Durham, North Carolina. So that kind of started us on our road to home-based interventions. And we've done a host of these interventions over time, and they're featured here. We've actually done a few more since then. And these were home-based interventions for which we either did computer-tailored mailed materials, and we either paired that with telephone counseling or we didn't. And we had really good results over time. We were able to achieve differences in body composition, achieving dietary and exercise goals, making an impact on, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the RENEW study. And then our later efforts have been really trying to use the cancer not use, but capitalize on the cancer survivors as an instrument of change and being able to reach out to their social networks. How do we achieve our success since we can't touch our people? Well, we rely heavily on multidisciplinary research team, but we also rely heavily on behavioral theory. And so I'm a big proponent of capitalizing and really firmly grounding any intervention on behavioral theory. Our personal favorite is social cognitive theory, which really builds on the concepts of self-efficacy or constructs of self-efficacy through incremental goal setting, reinforcement, overcoming barriers, modeling, and then offering the social support that we can in a home-based means. We also include the behavioral change techniques that are featured that are reviewed by Michi. But this is a very nice review article back 7 years ago now by Marty Hedges that shows that these behavioral change techniques, and we do bolster our interventions on these behavioral change techniques, some of which are incorporated already in behavioral theory, but some of them are additional. We also give tailored messages. We tailor on the usual suspects, age, race, gender. But the hook that we seem to really see some movement in is cancer coping style. These cancer coping styles were first named by Maggie Watson. Helpless, hopeless, fighting spirit, anxious preoccupiers. There's 3 more. But the fighting spirits and the fatalists are really where about 96% of cancer survivors lie. And we do tailor messages as a hook. So we find out what the cancer coping style is of our survivor, and then we match a person in either their mail materials or in our electronic means of pushing these interventions out that mirrors their cancer coping style and hopefully provides them with this model or role model that they can use. And then this is how it all comes together. We use incremental goal setting with self-monitoring and feedback. So through graphs and messaging, we find that we're able to move people. We identify the various barriers, and we use different techniques like an advice column to make things a little bit more personalized. And then again, offering this role modeling person that they can, or testimony that they can hopefully use as motivation. So, in our electronic, in our electronic interventions, we have now adapted that. It's not a flat file, but more video that does this role modeling. But at first, I want to tell you about our one study that Renew, and this was again a tailored mailed print telephone counseling, so kind of an old-timey intervention. And we intervened in individuals with breast, prostate, and colorectal cancer who were older and at least 5 years out from diagnosis. Why did we use 5 years out from diagnosis? Because that's what the RFA said, and we wanted the money to be able to do this. Now, when you do home-based interventions, it really does blow out your geographic area for which you can intervene. And this study started when I was at Duke, and we were able to really hit an international or target an international audience. So not only in 31 states in the US, but then also Canada and the UK. Here was our study schema. This had a waitlist control design. We had 641 cancer survivors who were evenly distributed to our immediate intervention or to our waitlist control. At 1 year, we switched over. And then the individuals who were in the wait list received the intervention, and those that received the intervention immediately were followed for another year, so we could get some long-term outcomes out of that population, and then see if our intervention was replicable. The Renew study recruited a sample that was older, a little bit more female than male, and our percent Caucasian was 89%. This was something that we weren't really happy with, but it's who we recruited. We've been able to make some inroads over time to have a more diverse population, or to be able to get more diverse samples coming into our studies, which we're really happy about. Most of them were breast and prostate. We've had problems getting colorectal cancer survivors, as do many national groups. And I don't know what it takes to get colorectal cancer survivors to come into studies, but I still haven't found the secret sauce yet. And maybe we can talk about that during the question and answer period. A lot of comorbidity, and they had a lot of room to make up in their physical functioning. Here were the results of the Renew trial. It was hugely successful. We were able to achieve significant outcomes in the areas of physical functioning, as well as exercise or physical activity, different types of physical activity. In many dietary domains, we were able, even though the study proposed just a very moderate amount of weight loss of no more than 1 pound per week, we achieved some differences in BMI. and that we were also able to impact quality of life in a favorable way. I'm showing you this because this gives you our data with regard to the waitlist control versus the immediate intervention. With the immediate intervention is featured in the dotted blue lines, the waitlist control in the yellow lines. And what you see is that you see separation of the curves at 1 year when the immediate intervention is getting something, the waitlist control is getting nothing. And then when we offer the waitlist control, the intervention, they come up to the same levels as the immediate intervention. So showing reproducibility. But the one thing that I'm very proud is that this was one of the few dietary interventions which resulted in a significant weight loss, and one that was sustained over 1 year after the intervention. So very happy with those results, even though the change was relatively small. Despite the success of those tailored print interventions, they stayed on the shelf because they really did cost $500 to produce. With that, those tailored materials that you send to people, you also had to fund a telephone counselor. So we thought, oh, this cost is fairly minimal. However, it wasn't minimal to to the third-party payers that would be picking up these costs. And so again, very disappointing from the standpoint of dissemination. And over time, what we were always defending is, oh, gee, cancer survivors are old. They're not going to want a computer, an internet or web-based intervention. However, after several attempts at being able to try to disseminate a mail print and telephone counseling intervention and having it fall flat on its face, we had a reckoning moment, and we said, you know what, we really have to move into the 21st century and start doing electronic interventions. And I really want to, at this point in time, call out the expertise that's at UCSF, because you have some leaders in the field that I'm very not jealous about, admire. Erin Van Blarigan, June Chan, Stacy Kenfield. These are great people, and we really do look to their work as kind of a guiding star. But I'm going to talk about the intervention that we have done, our electronic interventions over time. So we started off with this Renew, which was a very successful intervention. And then through some ACS funding, we're able to develop a prototype. The prototype was fairly primitive. It was called Survivor Shine. It still lives on the website. It still gets between 1,000 and 700 hits or users a year, even though we don't really advertise it as such. But it was our first foray into the field, and we got some favorable results with that. Using Survivor Shine as our prototype, we then applied for a PO1 to get our study up called Amplify. And in Amplify, we are enrolling, or we have enrolled survivors of 9 obesity-related cancers, and we focus on older, minority, and rural populations. And this is a PO1, so it's a big kahuna. And here are the various funding sources of Amplify. Even though you have a PO1, as you know, NCI tends to cut funding, and you need to get funding from other sources. So we have here are the stats on it, and then the clinical trial number is there below. But let me go a little bit into Amplify. Those of you that are wanting to put in a PO1, this kind of shows you the level of integration that you have to use. But then it also explains what Amplify is. So Amplify is 3 projects hooked together. The very first project is the one that I lead. It's strictly a dietary intervention that's aimed at weight loss and improving diet quality. We looked at Renew. We did web-based adaptations through a series of focus groups that were tailored on on who we were trying to target. So rural, minority, older populations. And then we did extensive beta testing after that. And then our efficacy testing phase, we recruited 351 people. They were randomized to the dietary intervention, which was 6 months in duration, and that was compared against a waitlist control. My colleague Laura Rogers was in charge of a physical activity intervention, and she modified her Beat Cancer trial, which was, again, very successful, using the same sort of focus groups, beta testing system, and then efficacy tested that against a waitlist control. And these were common waitlist controls, so you kind of were able to capitalize on using the waitlist control for both trials here. But she did a 6-month physical activity intervention. Project 3, what we wanted to find out with this was a fundamental question. It seems pretty basic, but nobody's ever answered this. Is it better to present diet and exercise information sequentially, or is it better to really combine the content together and then deliver that simultaneously? So these people here that were in the first trial got the alternative intervention, and then the waitlist control got the simultaneous intervention. The projects were supported by 4 different cores, and that's it. Now, our main outcomes for project 1 were, could we achieve, again, with this was a minimal touch, just a completely electronic intervention. We set our sights so that we thought we could achieve them. A higher proportion of participants would achieve at least a 3% weight loss. And our outcomes were weight, diet quality, and I'll get into how we measured these in a little bit later. For project 2, a higher proportion of our participants would achieve at least 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity that would be assessed via accelerometry. Project 3, again, we kind of combined these 2 outcomes together, and then we also added diet quality as another domain. So we started our very first person that we were going to do our baseline assessment for Amplify, and what we did say is we were going to use visiting nurses. Was really recruited, and it was scheduled the same day our institution was shut down by COVID. So not a great time to start. So we had to really run quickly to see if we could really convert everything to virtual assessments. We, our other, a large portion of our outcomes were already home-based. So surveys, you could do them via RedCap. Physical activity by sending out that activity monitor. We can measure, again, sleep using the activity monitor actigraphy. However, what was a lot different is that we wanted to assess physical performance, and that we needed to do validity and reliability tests on, and we ran quickly in that year. And we did a reliability and validity study that was reported in Cancers, and our protocol is in there. And so we do the 2-minute step test, 30-second chair stand, 8-foot get up and go. We do flexibility, back scratch, and our back scratch and chair reach. However, and we also do balance testing, but we were no longer able to do arm curls, dynamometer testing for upper body strength, which was unfortunate, but it is what it is. And then we found that we could not get reliable measures with the 8-foot walk. So that was unfortunate, but you do what you can do. In the meantime, we got an R1 to assess muscle mass using D3 creatine. This is such a cool technique where you give individuals a stable isotope. Three days later, they pee on a test strip. You collect the test strip, you know how much muscle mass is on their body. And we're really interested to see how our sequential versus our simultaneous delivery of interventions pans out using this test. What we had originally proposed was to draw blood, phlebotomy. We converted that to dry blood spot testing. We measure blood pressure and heart rate using portable blood pressure cuffs. So we've been able to roll using the virtual assessments. I'm not saying it's ideal, but it's a way for us to go forward and collect some really nice outcomes regardless. So what is Amplify? Well, Amplify is a web-based diet and exercise trial for cancer survivors who are committed to taking the next year to lose weight, eat healthy, move to better weight. And we get, by logging in only 15 to 20 minutes each week and by interacting with the program, cancer survivors can begin their journey to better health. And I have a brief video here that kind of depicts the various components of Amplify. So Yvette, take it away and show that.
Welcome. This video will show you how to use Amplify. When you sign into Amplify, the first thing you'll see is the home page. This is Command Central for your Amplify program. If there is something new for you, such as a learning session or a video, the home page will start with information about that. Below that, you'll see today's tip to help you along your way to better health. Scroll down and you'll see information about other Amplify content. The information on the home page changes as you use Amplify. Near the top of every page is a menu bar, where you can click to open each of the areas of Amplify: Home, My Progress, Sessions, Tools, and Support. In the My Progress area, you can track this week's progress with each of the healthy lifestyle changes Amplify is helping you make. Simply click on a day and answer the questions about what you did that day. You can also see information about your goals, strategies for making improvements, and a history of what you've done so far. Come to the My Progress page often. The more you use it, the better you'll be able to understand what works for you. In the Sessions area, you'll find a list of all of the learning sessions available to you. Sessions are like mini classes. Each one teaches a new topic. Each week, a new session is added, with the most recent sessions at the top of the list. You can focus on specific topics by clicking on the categories in the blue box on the left. Click a session to open and watch it. Most sessions begin with an interactive video. Be sure to complete all of the activities in the video to get the most out of the session. In the Tools area, you'll find a list of resources you can use again and again to support your efforts. Just like with Sessions, new tools are added each week. You are never alone on your Amplify journey. Check out the support area for answers to your questions about making healthful changes or how to use Amplify. There's also information about the Amplify Facebook group, where you can connect with other Amplify participants. Those are the main parts of Amplify.
Okay. Thank you. And now let me get into sharing my screen again, which I'm trying to click on it and it is not working.
We'll We will wait with bated breath. Please
Okay, hold on one second.
take your time.
No problem.
It should hopefully work now. I just clicked another permission.
Okay.
There we go.
Let's see. From beginning, current slide. Okay, good. You guys see that now?
Yes, perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so the eligibility criteria for Amplify, we're only taking cancer survivors that are age 50 and older. Here are the 9 different obesity-related cancers that we have recruited from. Cancer survivors have to have a BMI of 25 to 50. Again, this is an unsupervised physical activity program, so we needed to be safe with regard to ACSM guidelines. Couldn't be enrolled in a diet or exercise program. English writing or speaking, we'd love to be able to really translate to this to other areas, and then completed the 8th grade. Our reach has been, with Amplify, has been in 31 to 50 of the US states, and 87% of those have the highest number of cancer survivors. So we're happy with the reach. Here are the characteristics of the Amplify study sample. We have a large proportion of our sample is women. Our age range is pretty much on target with what the national data are for cancer survivors. Our percent minority and percent rural is higher than the national average, so we're happy about that. And here is our distribution of cancer survivors. Those of you that do work in cancer survivorship know that when you open your doors, you tend to get flooded with a lot of breast cancer patients. And indeed, this is no different than many other trials, but we do have a good representation of other cancers as well. So what are our patients saying, our participants saying about Amplify? And this is something that I'm most proud of with our result. We're making a difference in their lives. And this vignette is presented from one of our prostate cancer survivors. I'm a 68-year-old prostate cancer survivor. Before I started Amplify, I was completely washed out. He could barely walk 100 feet without having to stop and catch his breath. This is a man that we recruited right during COVID. His daughter had 2 young grandchildren who she needed the grandparents to take care of, and he felt guilty because he couldn't really provide the care that his wife was really getting tired, and he felt like he wasn't contributing. And this program's made a difference. He's now eating and sleeping better. He lost weight. So with Amplify, he didn't lose a large amount of weight here, only 16 pounds. But that was 10% of his body weight. And what we were able to do is to really find that his physical functioning improved with regard to the 2-minute step test that we did, as well as other functional tests. So this is what we're most proud of. Those of you that do interventions may find these data interesting. I know I did. Again, with Amplify, we have the two modules, 1 diet, 1 exercise. Both are 6 months in duration, and then we have a combined intervention that we're testing. What we see here is Amplify is getting engagement that exceeds what has been put out in review articles for diet and exercise interventions that last at least a month or longer, and that is featured at that 23.1% on the x-axis there. So we're happy that our interventions are getting more engagement than what has been published before. However, what is very interesting is the differential that we're seeing here. The people that get the diet intervention first have higher amounts of engagement than the people that get exercise first. So that will be interesting to see if these effects and engagement actually do translate to objective outcomes for the study. And also it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with muscle mass. And here are our preliminary data. And for the sake of not being able to break our intervention with regard to our outcomes, the intervention groups are all combined together. So we're probably going to see differences by group assignment here, but we're seeing a drop in weight of 4.5 kilos, so over 10 pounds. Waist circumference drop in 4 centimeters. 54% of our population in those intervention groups lose at least 3% of weight. 43% lose at least 5%, and 24% lose at least 10% of weight. What I'm most happy with, though, is that last bar, which shows that 55% of those who lose weight after the intervention ends and we check them 6 months later, they maintain their weight. So I think that's where the holy grail is. We also show that our interventions increase moderate and vigorous physical activity by about 20 minutes a day, and a 13.2% increase, 13-point increase in healthy eating index, which is featured here on the graph. So in concluding, cancer survivors are a growing and high-risk population who could benefit from more education and support. There is certainly a role for clinical care, but there's a role for interventions that use minimal touch. There have been significant strides in this area, but definitely more work needs to be done. Our newest project on the street is a collaboration with our team as well as Carrie Winter's Stone team at Oregon Health Science University in Oregon. And what we're doing now is combining Amplify with her basically internet-based exercise resistance training protocol, and seeing if we can make a difference in obese frailty, which occurs to a high degree in prostate cancer survivors who get androgen deprivation therapy. So those of you that want to have patients who could benefit from that, please send us an email or basically scan that URL code and refer. We'd love to get people into this trial. And everybody knows you don't do this by yourself. You do it with a team. It takes a village. So here are our various villages for Renew, for Amplify, and of course you do it with cancer survivors who participate. So have to thank them and also thank our funding sources. And with that, I'm happy to take questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Virtual applause. This is only the trickiest part of our Zoom grand rounds. So I want to invite people to go on video if they have a question that they are able to ask. I know several of our people have messaged me that they're currently commuting. So I have a few questions that have been asked. Let me see. Okay. All right. The first question is actually from one of our medical oncologists here. Why do you think the 6-month intervention resulted in more engagement? And also, why do you think the nutrition first was better for engagement?
So I'm sorry, I didn't catch that first part of that question.
Why was the 6-month intervention? Why do you think the 6-month intervention resulted in more engagement?
So that one is, I mean, we never forecasted that. I think a lot of people come into Amplify with weight loss as a primary driver of their interest. And so therefore, they equate weight loss with more of a dietary intervention than exercise. And I can't say as I can argue with them, because our studies on exercise show that exercise really doesn't make you lose weight per se. It makes your body shrink and occupy less space, but you don't see that on the scale. Whether we're seeing that sort of bias or not, I do not know. Another reason, and Holly Wyatt, who does work in the the obesity area, has also found this with people who are not cancer survivors per se, but in the general population, is that individuals oftentimes just feel awkward exercising, and that you may have better success holding off exercise until they start to lose weight and maybe feel a little like they don't have as much body to move around. So those are two reasons why.
Thank you. Now, another question is a little bit more specific about the specifics of the diet that you recommend. In Amplify, is it strictly vegetarian or pescatarian? Do you recommend for or against consumption of dairy or gluten?
Okay.
And this is from someone who's interested in knowing sort of how you handle quote unquote controversial foods when you develop the intervention.
Okay, so that person that's a very good question. There's always controversy in nutrition, and that's one of the reasons why we went for a web-based platform as opposed to putting it out on an app, because we can always go in and tweak it if we need to. For example, some of our advice with regard to sweeteners. When the erythritol story broke and the World Health Organization basically put the kibosh on sweeteners. It's not that we offered faulty information, it was just the emphasis and the framing that needed to be changed. So we could easily go in and tweak it, which is something that you can't do with an app. Getting back to what kind of diet do we do? Those guidelines that I showed with regard to the American Cancer Society and the World Cancer Research Fund, we mirror those guidelines. Now, the very first sessions on diet are really about energy balance and how to achieve that. We lead people through some self-monitoring. We give them a calorie budget. We give them tools, various calorie levels, either an exchange list, or we give them a structured meal plan. But the guidelines are based on those recommendations from the American Cancer Society and World Cancer Research Fund. So we recommend a plant-based diet. That does not mean that it's vegetarian. Now, if people are vegetarian, we've tailored that. We have tailored meal plans to address people who are vegetarians and messaging behind that. But we do not, we are trying to hit people where they are. A lot of our people are in Alabama. I can tell you the plant-based diet is not being followed here. So how do we get people moving toward limiting their meat to the 12 to 18 ounces that's recommended for the various gender is where we're at. So reducing it incrementally while increasing fruit and vegetable consumption, again, incrementally. So that's why that My Progress page shows people, okay, what are they doing this week? What do they need to start really concentrating on the week ahead? And the week thereafter, we either say, oh, see, you're still having problems, or I'm basically synthesizing this here on the fly. We see that you're still having problems here. Why don't you try this strategy to see if this is successful? Or if they are able to accomplish and eat another serving of fruits and vegetables, or they are able to reduce their meat consumption by a serving, oh, good for you. That's terrific. Now, next week, let's try this. So it's that kind of give and take. We meet people where they are. If they are coming in, for example, with regard to gluten, we don't message a lot on that, but we basically do address that and just say, if you're coming in and you have an intolerance, please keep that in mind as you are following these other guidelines. So that's how we move people along. It's and each week, the thing that is not really featured here is we do have a series of 2 email messages that are going out to people. Hey, we have a new session that you should watch. It's on fruits and vegetables, or it's on dining out, and how you can follow your diet while you're dining out. And then also at the end of the week, hey, we see that it's the end of the week. We either saw that you've been logging your progress on the My Progress page or not, or whatever. And we push out that message so that they're actively engaged. And again, they're hopefully coming back for the daily tip and these types of things.
Thank you. This is so broadly applicable to a lot of different research projects that we are looking at, even outside of nutrition, in terms of having people stay engaged during these different sort of interventions. I want to move now. Dr. Chan, I believe, has a question. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you so much for this presentation. I want to say that one thing that's really striking to me is just how you led us through a chronological journey, and every step of the way you've kind of pivoted and adapted to make sure that it was accessible. The question I have is, are there specific populations that are not represented in your current studies? And looking forward, what are some ways your team is looking to make culturally sensitive interventions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously, our intervention, that eligibility criteria must speak English, has really blocked various populations out. We are trying to get it, putting in grant applications to do an OLA Amplify. So far, they have not been successful. Hopefully, we can bat one up and be able to do one. So that I'd like to be able to get more populations there that are culturally different, and be looking for various people to help us with that endeavor. You saw that some of the populations, for example, the non-solid tumors, our representation was pretty low. And so to crank that up more, so to be able to reach those populations, I'm really happy that, we were successful in being able to reach a higher degree of rural with this time around, as well as African American primarily. But yeah, there's a lot more work that has to be done.
Thank you. Another question that gets to, I think, the broader context that Dr. Chan's question referred to is a lot of the work that we do at our Osher Center is focused on integrative health equity, which we define as optimal health for all people, using a whole person approach that explicitly recognizes factors like social determinants of health, cultural, structural determinants. So in looking at your research, are there, and I realize that this is a sort of a different level and very much looking ahead, but are there some upstream policy changes that you would hope for, or are there larger and sort of outside the scope of the academy potentially changes that could have a big impact on supporting cancer survivors with healthy eating and with physical activity?
Yeah. And these are really good questions. Yes, so social determinants of health. We had talked about ADI and being used, having that being brought in so that we could craft messaging that really does address the environment in which cancer survivors live. And we know that a lot of our cancer survivors live in, we're doing the geocoding right now on the Amplify population. And many of them live in these high need areas. And so to be able to address things like, the walkability, various options of physical activity in their environment, gleaning as a way to increase fruit and vegetable consumption and that sort of thing. That's an area that we really could bank upon, and I think that ADI actually does help us with. As we renew Amplify, another population is are those that are covered by the Americans Disability Act. And so, being able to craft this so that it is that it can be used by people who are hearing impaired or have low vision is another population. So trying to reduce the disparities there is one of our goals.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to squeeze in one last question here. I want to give people time to get to clinic and other meetings. So this is a question about engagement with the web browser. With so much overstimulation from the internet, sorry, more questions coming in. How can people be made to feel more connected with the program with so much noise from other things?
So yeah, and particularly in the area of diet and physical activity, and once people start browsing on that, that they get a ton of garbage coming in. So the one thing that is really how we get engagement are those prompts that are done by email or text, so that we can boost that up. We had hoped that some of our social media support, like Facebook, that is announced on there, would have been more successful. Facebook was, quite frankly, an abysmal failure, and so we're not going to include that in on any other future application, just because our data are so dismal on that. But yeah, so the targeted messages by email or by text, I think, draws people back into the project.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to address the many more questions. I can certainly share them with you, just so you're familiar with other things that people are interested in. But I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Very illuminating. So again, another virtual round of applause for Dr. Demark-Wahnefried. And thank you again. Really a pleasure to learn from you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, and I'm going to be on for another 15 minutes or so. So anybody that wants to hang on, please do.
Okay, great. So if folks who had some questions would like to come on video, that would be great. And we can go ahead and address some of those. Thank you, everybody.